November 8th, 2022. A 30-year-old billionaire woke up to a catastrophe. His entire empire, valued at $32 billion just months earlier, was about to collapse. By November 11th, it was gone. $8 billion in customer funds had vanished. And Sam Bankman-Fried? He went from being the golden boy of crypto to a fugitive. This is the story of the fastest fall from grace in financial history. Not because of bad luck, not because of market crashes, but because of a carefully constructed fraud that fooled investors, regulators, celebrities, and billions of people worldwide. Sam Bankman-Fried built FTX, a cryptocurrency exchange that seemed revolutionary. He was young, smart, philanthropic. He donated millions to political causes. He was the future of finance. But behind the scenes, he was running one of the greatest Ponzi schemes ever created. And for years, nobody noticed. This is how a 30-year-old made $8 billion disappear in 72 hours, and how the entire crypto industry nearly collapsed with him.
To understand how $8 billion disappeared, you first need to understand Sam Bankman-Fried. He wasn't born in poverty. He was born into privilege. His father was a law professor at Stanford. His mother was a bankruptcy attorney. Both brilliant, both accomplished. The family lived in Palo Alto, the heart of Silicon Valley. Sam grew up surrounded by success, intellect, and ambition. From an early age, he was different, not just smart, obsessed. He taught himself to code. He read voraciously about economics, philosophy, and mathematics. By high school, he was already thinking about optimizing systems, about finding inefficiencies, about exploiting them. In college at MIT, he studied physics and mathematics, but his real education came from cryptocurrency. He became obsessed with Bitcoin, with blockchain technology, with the emerging crypto market. While others saw it as a gambling den, Sam saw it differently. He saw an opportunity. He saw inefficiencies. He saw a market that was young, unregulated, and ripe for exploitation. In 2019, at just 27 years old, Sam Bankman-Fried founded FTX, a cryptocurrency exchange. It was supposed to be different, safer, more professional, better designed. And at first, it was. FTX grew rapidly. Venture capitalists threw billions at him. By 2021, at age 28, Sam Bankman-Fried was worth $26 billion on paper. A billionaire before 30, the youngest self-made billionaire in the world. But what made Sam special, or so he claimed, was his philosophy. He talked about effective altruism. He talked about using wealth to help humanity. He donated billions to political causes. He funded pandemic prevention research. He was a Democrat in a Republican-dominated crypto space. He was generous. He was philanthropic. He was the future of finance. The media loved him. Forbes called him a visionary. Politicians sought his donations. Celebrities endorsed him. He was invited to every important conference. He was the golden boy of crypto. Young, brilliant, philanthropic, successful. The narrative was perfect. The story was compelling. Sam Bankman-Fried was supposed to be different from other billionaires. He was supposed to be better. But the narrative was a lie. And behind it, a massive fraud was unfolding. Nobody knew it yet, But the empire was built on sand, and sand cannot hold forever.
FTX wasn't Sam's first venture. Before FTX, there was Alameda Research. Sam founded it in 2017 as a cryptocurrency trading firm. It was supposed to be simple: buy low, sell high, find arbitrage opportunities in the chaotic crypto markets and profit from them. Alameda was wildly successful. But FTX was the real prize. In May 2019, Sam launched FTX, a cryptocurrency exchange. An exchange is where people buy and sell cryptocurrencies. Think of it like the stock market, but for digital assets. The problem with existing exchanges was that they were poorly designed, chaotic, untrustworthy. Mt. Gox had been hacked years earlier, losing billions. Other exchanges were sketchy, unstable, prone to crashes. Sam saw an opportunity. He would build the exchange that crypto deserved: professional, secure, user-friendly, and it worked. FTX grew at an extraordinary pace. Millions of users signed up. Billions of dollars flowed through the platform. The exchange became the second largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world, second only to Binance. By 2021, FTX was valued at $18 billion. By 2022, it was valued at $32 billion. In just 3 years, Sam had built an empire. But FTX was more than just an exchange. Sam expanded aggressively. He bought naming rights to the Miami Heat's arena, FTX Arena. He sponsored football stadiums. He bought advertising during the Super Bowl. He was everywhere. He was unavoidable. This was deliberate. Sam understood branding. He understood that trust was everything in crypto. If people trusted FTX, they would put their money on FTX. And if they put their money on FTX, he could charge fees. And the fees were enormous. Every trade on FTX generated revenue. Every token swap generated revenue. FTX was a cash machine. But what made FTX special, or so Sam claimed, was the tokenomics. FTX had its own token, FTT. Sam claimed it was revolutionary. He claimed it would increase in value. He encouraged people to buy it. He made it essential to the FTX ecosystem. Investors bought FTT. The price rose. FTX generated revenue. Sam's net worth rose. Everyone was winning, or so it seemed. The reality was more sinister. FTX was generating enormous revenues, but behind the scenes, something darker was happening. A secret scheme, a hidden company, and billions of dollars flowing in the wrong direction. But nobody knew. The narrative was still perfect. The empire seemed unshakable.
But here's the problem with the FTX story. There was a second company, Alameda Research, Sam's trading firm. And FTX and Alameda were connected in a way that nobody outside the inner circle knew about. On the surface, they were separate entities. FTX was the exchange. Alameda was a trader on the exchange. Simple, transparent, or so the story went. But the reality was completely different. Alameda wasn't just a trader. Alameda had special privileges. Alameda could borrow money from FTX, billions of dollars, without collateral, without restrictions. Alameda could make massive trades that would have crashed the exchange if anyone else tried them. Alameda had access to customer deposits, customer money that was supposed to be held separately and safely. Instead, it was being lent to Alameda, and Alameda was using it to make risky bets. Cryptocurrency bets, real estate bets, political donations, venture capital investments. Alameda was essentially a venture capital firm funded by FTX customer deposits. and Sam owned both companies. He could move money between them freely. He could hide losses from one by channeling funds from the other. It was a perfect fraud, completely hidden, completely undetectable as long as nobody looked too hard. The scheme worked like this. Customers deposit money into FTX. FTX takes that customer money and lends it to Alameda. Alameda uses the money to make risky bets. Some bets win, some bets lose. When bets lose, Alameda is underwater. But instead of losing money, Alameda just asks FTX for more loans, more customer deposits, more money to cover the losses. And Sam, running both companies, just says yes. The money flows in a circle. Customer deposits fund Alameda's losses. Alameda's losses are hidden by more customer deposits. It's a Ponzi scheme, a perfect Ponzi scheme, and the only person who knew about it was Sam. His inner circle knew bits and pieces, but the full extent, only Sam understood the complete picture. The FTX employees didn't know. The venture capitalists didn't know. The regulators didn't know. The customers certainly didn't know. They thought their money was safe on FTX. They had no idea it was being funneled to Alameda to cover trading losses. They had no idea they were funding Sam's philanthropic donations, his political campaigns, his real estate purchases, his venture capital bets. For years, the scheme held. Year after year, more customer deposits flowed in. Year after year, Alameda's losses grew. And year after year, Sam moved the money around, covering his tracks, maintaining the illusion. But Ponzi schemes don't last forever. Eventually, someone notices. Eventually, the math doesn't work. Eventually, reality catches up. And in November 2022, reality came crashing down.
For years, the scheme worked perfectly. Money flowed in. Losses were hidden. The narrative remained intact. But in late 2022, something changed. The cracks began to show. It started with a simple article. On November 2, 2022, CoinDesk published an investigation. They had obtained documents showing that Alameda Research had massive holdings in FTT, the FTX token. Not just holdings, massive concentration. Billions of dollars worth. The article asked a simple question. Where did Alameda get all this FTT? And why was so much of their net worth tied up in a single token controlled by Sam Bankman-Fried? It seemed like a circular scheme. FTX creates FTT. Sam owns both FTX and Alameda. Alameda buys FTT. The price of FTT goes up because of artificial demand. Sam's net worth increases on paper because he owns FTT. But is any of this real? Is any of this backed by actual value? Or is it just circular money moving between companies Sam controls? The article was damaging, but it was also survivable. Sam could explain it away. He did explain it away. He said Alameda's FTT holdings were legitimate investments. He said the market was overreacting. Everything was fine. But then something else happened. On November 6, 2022, Changpeng Zhao, the CEO of Binance, the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, made an announcement. Binance had massive holdings of FTT tokens, and Binance had decided to sell them, all of them, billions of dollars worth. The reason? Zhao said Binance wanted to reduce exposure to Alameda after reading the CoinDesk article. The announcement sent shockwaves through the market. If Binance was selling FTT, the price would crash. And if FTT crashed, Alameda's net worth, which was heavily dependent on FTT holdings, would collapse. Suddenly, people realized, maybe Alameda wasn't as solvent as Sam claimed. Maybe Alameda was vulnerable. Maybe FTX was vulnerable.
Panic spread instantly. Customers began withdrawing money from FTX, just small amounts at first, but then more, then massive amounts. FTX was facing a bank run, the most dangerous thing that can happen to an exchange. If too many people withdraw too quickly, the exchange runs out of money, and then everyone loses everything. Sam tried to manage the crisis. He reached out to other crypto companies, asking for an $8 billion emergency loan. Nobody would help. He reached out to Binance, asking if they would buy FTX. Changpeng Zhao agreed to look at the books. He sent his team to do due diligence. They looked at FTX's financial statements. They looked at FTX's reserves. They looked at the numbers, and then Zhao made a decision. On November 8, 2022, Changpeng Zhao announced that Binance was not going to buy FTX. The deal was off. The reason? The books didn't add up. Binance couldn't figure out where the money was. And if Binance couldn't figure it out, nobody could. The announcement was a death sentence. It meant that FTX was insolvent. It meant that FTX couldn't survive. It meant that customers were about to lose everything. Within hours, withdrawals accelerated. Within 24 hours, billions of dollars had been withdrawn. Within 48 hours, FTX was empty. The exchange had no money left. The greatest cryptocurrency exchange in the world had collapsed, and it happened in just days. From peak valuation of $32 billion to bankruptcy in 72 hours. The fastest corporate collapse in history. And Sam Bankman-Fried? He fled, first to the Bahamas, then he deleted his Twitter, then he went silent. The golden boy of crypto was now a fugitive. The narrative was shattered. The empire was gone, and billions of customers faced a terrifying reality. Their money was lost, completely lost, with no insurance, no protection, no way to recover it. The fraud was finally exposed, and the cost was catastrophic.
November 8, 2022, 11 a.m. Changpeng Zhao's announcement went public. Binance was not buying FTX. The deal was off. Within minutes, FTX's valuation dropped from $32 billion to essentially zero. The company was insolvent, and everyone knew it. By noon, FTX had suspended all customer withdrawals. The statement was brutal and honest. We've discovered that the reserves held in FTX were not fully backed and had been misused across multiple channels. Translation: your money is gone. By 2 p.m. that afternoon, Sam Bankman-Fried released a statement. He tried to salvage the situation. He claimed everything was fine. He claimed FTX was solvent. He claimed it was just a liquidity issue. But nobody believed him. The evidence was clear. Within hours, FTX's entire organization began to crumble. Employees realized the truth. They weren't just working for a company that was failing. They were working for a company built on fraud. Some employees had invested their entire life savings in FTX. They had been given company stock at valuations of $32 billion. That stock was now worthless. Years of work, years of salary, invested back into a company that didn't exist. Gone. By November 9th, lawsuits began. Customers filed class actions. States filed investigations. The FBI opened a criminal investigation. Within 24 hours, FTX had hired bankruptcy lawyers. Within 48 hours, FTX had filed for bankruptcy. The company that had sponsored stadiums, the company that had advertised during the Super Bowl, the company valued at $32 billion, was now bankrupt. But the real shock came when people started looking at the numbers. When investigators began examining the books, they discovered something terrifying. FTX customer deposits, approximately $8 billion, were completely missing. Not invested, not in reserves, just gone. Missing. Vanished. Customers had deposited their money on FTX expecting it to be held safely. They were promised their assets would be segregated and protected. Instead, the money had been transferred to Alameda Research, and Alameda had used it for risky cryptocurrency bets, real estate purchases, political donations, venture capital investments. And when those bets went bad, the money was lost, completely lost. $8 billion from millions of customers around the world. And there was no insurance, there was no protection, there was no government guarantee. The money was just gone. And Sam Bankman-Fried? On November 8th, the day of the collapse, he fled the Bahamas, where FTX was headquartered. He deleted his Twitter, he stopped responding to messages, he went silent. For days, nobody knew where he was. Speculation ran wild. He was in Argentina, he was in Costa Rica, he was hiding somewhere in the Caribbean. His parents were lawyers. Maybe they would help him escape. For a moment, it seemed like Sam might actually disappear. Like a billionaire fugitive, he might evade justice and disappear into a non-extradition country. But then, on November 13th, 5 days after the collapse, Sam Bankman-Fried was arrested in the Bahamas, extradited to the United States to face criminal charges, wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, potentially decades in prison. The golden boy of crypto, the billionaire philanthropist, the future of finance, was now facing prison time for running one of the greatest frauds in financial history. The empire that had taken 3 years to build had taken 72 hours to destroy, and the man who created it was facing the consequences. But the real victims weren't Sam Bankman-Fried or the venture capitalists who lost money. The real victims were the millions of customers, people who had deposited their savings, their retirement funds, their children's college funds. All gone. $8 billion. Completely lost.
The collapse of FTX wasn't just a disaster for Sam Bankman-Fried, it was a disaster for everyone connected to it. For customers, it was catastrophic. Millions of people around the world lost their life savings. Retirement accounts that were supposed to provide security in old age, gone. College funds for children, gone. Emergency savings that took years to accumulate, gone. Some customers lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some lost millions. And there was no insurance, no protection, no government guarantee. Cryptocurrency exchanges operate in a regulatory gray zone. Customer deposits aren't protected the way they are at traditional banks. Your money on FTX was essentially unprotected, and now it was lost. But the consequences extended far beyond individual customers. The entire cryptocurrency industry was damaged. Other exchanges faced sudden withdrawals as customers panicked and moved their money to safer platforms. Cryptocurrency prices crashed, Bitcoin fell, Ethereum fell. Smaller coins evaporated. Billions of dollars of value simply disappeared from the market. But the contagion spread even further. Venture capital firms that had invested in FTX faced massive losses. Three Arrows Capital, a hedge fund that had been heavily exposed to FTX, had already collapsed months earlier. Genesis Global Capital, a major cryptocurrency lending platform, faced bankruptcy after losing billions. The entire cryptocurrency ecosystem had been built on fragile foundations, and FTX's collapse revealed just how fragile those foundations were. The ripple effects reached politics. Sam had donated millions to both Democratic and Republican political campaigns. Now those politicians faced questions. Did they know about the fraud? Should they have known? Were they complicit? Some politicians returned the donations. Some faced investigations. The philanthropic world was also shaken. Sam had promised billions to effective altruism organizations. Those promises evaporated. Research projects that had been funded by Alameda faced uncertain futures. The political landscape shifted. The crypto-friendly politicians who had accepted Sam's money became crypto-skeptics overnight. Regulators who had been hesitant to regulate cryptocurrency suddenly had political cover to move forward. Laws were proposed. Regulations were drafted. The entire regulatory landscape for cryptocurrency changed because of FTX's collapse.
But perhaps most importantly, the collapse revealed a fundamental truth. Crypto wasn't revolutionary. It was just another financial system. And like all financial systems, it could be corrupted. It could be manipulated. It could collapse catastrophically. The promise of decentralization and trustlessness meant nothing when the people running the system were fraudsters. Sam Bankman-Fried had promised a better financial system. Instead, he had created a Ponzi scheme with better marketing, and millions of people had paid the price for believing the narrative.
How did nobody see this coming? How did the smartest investors in the world get fooled? How did regulators miss $8 billion in fraud? The answer is uncomfortable. We didn't want to see it. Sam Bankman-Fried was too perfect a narrative. He was young, brilliant, philanthropic. He was solving problems in cryptocurrency. He was the future. Nobody wanted to believe it was all a lie. But the truth is, the warning signs were everywhere. If you looked closely, you could have seen it. The circular relationship between FTX and Alameda was suspicious. Why would Alameda hold so much FTT? Why would an exchange channel customer deposits to a trading firm? Why would the founder own both companies? These questions should have triggered investigations, but they didn't. Why? Because venture capitalists were making money, because the narrative was compelling, because nobody wanted to interrupt the story. Regulators could have investigated, they had the authority, but crypto regulation was weak. Regulators were understaffed, and frankly, they didn't want to be seen as anti-innovation, so they didn't push too hard. Auditors could have caught it, but FTX wasn't a public company. It wasn't required to have external audits. Customers could have asked harder questions, but they trusted the narrative. They saw the Super Bowl ads. They saw the stadium sponsorships. They believed Sam's story. The second lesson is about incentives. Sam's incentive was to hide the fraud. The venture capitalist's incentive was to believe the narrative and make money. Regulators' incentive was to not interfere. Nobody's incentive was to tell the truth. This is the fundamental problem with unregulated systems. When incentives aren't aligned with truth, fraud becomes possible. The third lesson is about complexity. Cryptocurrency is complex. Most people don't understand it. Sam used that complexity as a weapon. He built systems so complicated that even smart people couldn't understand them. When you can't understand something, you can't spot fraud. You just trust the experts. And Sam was the expert. The final lesson is the most important. This will happen again, because the conditions that enabled FTX still exist. Cryptocurrency is still largely unregulated. Venture capital still prioritizes growth over scrutiny. Narratives still matter more than numbers. And human psychology hasn't changed. We still want to believe the story. We still follow charismatic leaders. We still assume that wealthy, intelligent people must be trustworthy. Until they prove otherwise. Sam Bankman-Fried didn't create anything new. He just took old fraud techniques, Ponzi schemes, circular transactions, hidden losses, and wrapped them in a cryptocurrency narrative. The fraud was ancient, but the victims are modern, and the lesson remains timeless. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. If the math doesn't add up, don't ignore it. And if nobody can explain how the system works, be very, very careful.
Sam Bankman-Fried built an empire on a simple lie, that he was different, that he understood finance better than others, that his system was revolutionary. But the truth was simpler. He was just another fraudster with better marketing.
The $8 billion that disappeared didn't vanish into thin air. It was stolen. It was moved from customer accounts into Alameda's losses. It was used to fund political campaigns, real estate purchases, and venture capital bets. And when those bets went bad, the money was gone forever. The lesson isn't complicated. It's ancient. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. If the math doesn't add up, don't ignore it. If you can't understand how the system works, be very careful. These lessons apply to more than just cryptocurrency. They apply to every market, every investment, every financial system. Because human nature doesn't change. Greed doesn't change. The desire to believe perfect narratives doesn't change. And fraudsters will always exploit these weaknesses. But understanding how fraud works, understanding how Sam Bankman-Fried fooled billions, gives you a weapon. It teaches you to question, to verify, to demand transparency. If you want to understand how money really works, how systems fail, how fraud hides in plain sight, subscribe to The Economic Story. We explore the forces that move billions, the mistakes that destroy empires, the lessons that repeat throughout history. New episode every single day. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.